I love thinking about comfy clothes and comfy people, loose and flowy. I do personally sometimes like the sensation of a snug fit, but less so than I did when I was younger. So I have this really specific memory of the clothes that I was wearing on Election Day in November 2016. I was wearing these really soft and really close-fitting green pants that I loved to wear. And I was wearing this cool little white jacket, and it hugged my shoulders, but it wasn't too tight. But then I keep thinking back on the rest of that year, and all of my clothes kind of fit easily on my body without being too tight, because I was very, very thin. And so for a few years there, it was really unfairly easy to buy clothes for that reason, and I didn't have all this noise in my head in fitting rooms for the first time in a really long time, but it was just gone. The noise was in my head the rest of the time, though. My social life had been really present until I graduated college the previous year, and it had thinned away. And with that, my body thinned away a bit too. These old emotional wounds were activated, and I was left with very little appetite. And one day, I found myself in this very thin time of my life, looking at my hips and noticing they looked really masculine. Oh. Okay, so at the time, I was experiencing a lifetime of gender dysphoria. I had not come out to myself as being trans. And so this feeling that had been growing silently down in my guts just absolutely burst into flower. And every morning, the scream of that flower just filled my head when I tried to get dressed. I was hungry for all kinds of things all of a sudden, and in hindsight, certainly also for more food, which probably would have helped regulate my emotional state. But I was also hungry for something else that felt really unknowable, really unattainable. My body took up so little space, and it wanted so much. There was this wound too large to contain, and I didn't have very many other skills, so I settled for tight pants. A tourniquet. A decade later, every few days in the news seems to offer a new gaping wound, too large to situate in my body, maybe too large to situate in yours. We come together somewhere like here at Sanctuary, hungry for comfort in our bodies and in our spirits, to sit around a crowded table together. We share food, we share our hopes and our fears, because we cannot do it alone. I'm really grateful to be here with you this evening in this space where we commit to making care and connection bigger, this space where we refuse to let empathy grow thin. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more of the story about this metaphorical tourniquet of mine. For about a year more, the tight pants worked. The hungry scream inside me was still there, but I was good at pushing it back inside. But then I started to heal. I started to be creative again. I was teaching music lessons. I moved to a new city, here to Boston, and I started to make friends in a community that has become my family. My physical body was getting stronger and more full of life, my sense of self, and then my legs started to press on all the seams that were snug around them. And so my hunger was back for food and for everything else good about life, and I hated it. I had grown up in the distorted food and body expectations of the early 2000s, so this impulse for self-control and self-blame was really familiar. It was almost comforting, and it, to this day, remains shockingly socially acceptable. Instead of being able to appreciate how loose these bonds spiritually and physically could have become in my life, I was really afraid of what I wanted. I wanted food, I wanted connection, I wanted to follow my vocation. But by a few years later, I had just tried several really strange fad diets to no real avail, and I was still really struggling with my mental health, with my vocation, and with this other thing that was sitting in here. That overpowering sense of gender dysphoria that was hungry and true and never got any quieter, no matter how many protein shakes I threw at it. Um, Aubrey Gordon is a writer, activist, and podcast host of the podcast Maintenance Phase, my only favorite podcast. And she is a leading voice in myth-busting health and wellness trends, writing about the cultural concept of thinness, doing fat activism. And so she writes in the introduction to one of her books, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. She says this: thinness is a bizarre and alienating construct. Thinness takes so much from so many straight-sized people. It takes their money for diet pills, meal delivery, workout tapes, and weight loss supplements. It takes away their ability to see their own bodies as they are, replacing that image with a distorted funhouse mirror reflection. It takes away interesting conversation, relegating us to the rote and interminably boring script of weight loss, who's on what diet, who was good, who was bad. Thinness takes away so many straight-sized people's ability to hear fat people, to acknowledge our experiences. Those are Aubrey's words, and I really feel that. I was so used to accepting, even valorizing these things, that concept, not even a real thing or a real attainable thing for my body, just this concept took away from my life, that it hadn't occurred to me that there was another way. And so as my body and all of me started to heal from this challenging time in my life, I just kept getting derailed by that negative self-talk. It took, and my musician's tendency to perfectionism, plus the loud gender dysphoria and everything else, made this alienation that Aubrey described almost tempting. Not an easy way out, but it was one of the only ones available. And yes, I think Aubrey Gordon and I are on a first-name basis. I have listened again to every episode of her podcast. Anyway, Aubrey goes on to say this: thinness takes so much from fat people, too. It takes away our ability to describe our own bodies, replacing our own descriptions with something thin people can understand, something that makes them feel comfortable, less threatened, and less privileged. And when it takes away our descriptions of our own bodies, it also takes away our ability to describe our own experiences and know that they will be heard on their own terms. It takes away quiet, everyday activities: eating, working out, buying groceries, and shopping for clothes all become an unspoken invitation to comment on our bodies, our practices, the weight loss in which we must be in hot pursuit. I've been thinking about this recently when listening to the song Crowded Table by the Highwomen, a song that we love to sing here at Sanctuary, because this table gets kind of metaphorical, right? And maybe precisely because we're making it metaphorical, we have to start being a lot more diligent to make sure there's actually room for everyone's physical body when we gather together. A seat for everyone is a great metaphor for liberation, but it's not just a metaphor. Fat people are often made unwelcome in spaces due to a lack of seating options or other welcoming tools that could make the space safe and comfortable for large bodies. And there's so often small talk about body size, over-explaining what we're putting in our mouth right at that moment, or exactly what's happening, that puts us all in this defensive posture, really alienating, really adverse to admitting that we all share hunger. We all need to eat. We came here to do it together. And so maybe in that moment, it really is just about the food, but what better place to start this practice of celebrating our shared hunger? What are the things that we can share shamelessly together that we all want out of our lives, out of our world, starting at the table? What opportunities for connection do we miss when this ghost of thinness sucks our authenticity out of the room? So I was trying to lose weight when the COVID lockdown hit in 2020. Disordered control around food and exercise is a really incredibly common stress response in humans. Sometimes we seek agency in a chaotic world that feels outside our control, and sometimes people internalize that. When it's too much to handle, maybe in that world that was full of an unknown virus, maybe we can still feel clean in some way. And that sense of purity in food restriction is really outside of my professional capacity to get into beyond sharing this because it's so complicated. Right now, we're in the middle of Ramadan and Lent, times when forms of fasting and changes to eating pattern can be a really meaningful spiritual practice for many people. But maybe you'd agree that if we get back to the story that I'm thinking through, it's not so much about telling you whether to eat or when or how much. It's about the false idol that is thinness. It's about something that apparently nobody is and apparently everyone should want to be. And our spiritual practice, even when it involves changing our eating patterns, should never be in service of that thinness. Maybe our spiritual practice can be finding another hunger, a desire not for some special new body or an idolized achievement, but for connection, for satisfaction, for justice. Maybe it starts at the table, maybe for you it doesn't. But if the food on the table has ever felt fraught to you, like it has felt for me, maybe that's something worth listening to. Because it is really scary to want nourishment without shame. It's scary if you've ever experienced food insecurity, or if you're experiencing it right now. I love you. It's scary if you've ever needed medical support with food and eating in the past, or now, or in the future. I love you. When I needed support from a registered dietitian in 2020 and 2021, I was scared a lot of the time. And that is why it is so important to me to talk about this. We have this fear of hunger, of desire that is natural to our bodies and that manifests around food, but it shows up in so many places in our lives. And I come to Sanctuary partly for this reason, to practice growing instead of thinning my relationship to other people, to my emotions, to my body, whatever it's saying today. As Adrienne Murray Brown says, I need people around me who can adapt, who have a gentle, bright presence, who make me feel free, creative, and beautiful in every aspect. I think we have an opportunity and we have an obligation to come together in spiritual community to answer that shared hunger. We start the practice with the food, and the practice never ends. I have one last excerpt from Aubrey Gordon's book to share with you. All of us deserve better than what thinness takes. We deserve a paradigm of personhood that does not make size or health a prerequisite for dignity and respect. We deserve more spaces to think and talk critically about our bodies as they are, not as we wish they were or as an unforgiving and unrealistic culture pressures them to change. But we can only do this if we acknowledge the differences in our bodies and the differences in our experiences that spring from bodies. We deserve to see each other as we are so that we can hear each other. And the perfect, unreachable standard of thinness is taking that from us. Thinness takes so much, and we deserve to take it back. We're offered ample opportunities to offer up our dignity on this altar of thinness, aren't we? Most of the time, it's little things, worrying about whether my body's exact shape and size are hyper-visible in these clothes, fielding a self-protective comment someone else made about how they could never order what I'm having. But the ever-present little things are pretty big right now, because recently I can't even watch TV without being inundated with weight loss ads that, as they run again and again, seem to promise a future without fat people. I don't like that. I want a future with fat people in it. I want to speak this sacred truth over and over. It is not better to be thin than to be fat. Thin bodies do not express moral purity, a guarantee of health, or a marker of dignity. Thinness takes, and it diminishes our bonds to one another and our inherent strength. It is not better to be thin than to be fat. And I finally stopped sitting at the altar of thinness when I came out as a transgender man. It's no surprise that trans people suffer from a high rate of eating disorders, since natural fat deposits on our body are a highly legible secondary sex characteristic. And so for that long time, I coped with the unmanageability of being trans by finding these little things in my body to focus on. But I'm so grateful it was never enough. I'm so glad I had no choice but to listen to my body's hunger for liberation, for food, for the chance to exist in peace with the size and shape that I am today and whatever happens to my body in the future. Today, when my body talks to me, I sometimes still don't hear it. But I practice over and over again, learning to listen, still gently unwinding the tourniquet of self-restriction, still gently turning my face away from the false idol of thinness. My old patterns are not erased. When I listen to my hunger, I feel the ties that want to bind it down wiggling right there under the soil in my body. But the garden, with practice, flourishes. I came out, and I have not stopped being hungry since then. I know that my body could never be inappropriate, and I know that about your body too. And so I haven't stopped being angry every time I see a weight loss ad on TV, which also probably means I should upgrade to ad-free on my streaming services because it's raising my blood pressure. I'm angry because I see a symptom of fascism every time. A promise of a world where we're less diverse, less abundant, more focused on control than connection? No. It's not about individual people's health outcomes or self-concept anymore at that point. It's the allure of a world that's orderly, tight, uniform, bound up into something artificially pure. And if we're not really dedicated really soon to fat liberation, this familiar avenue is going to stay easy to fall back into. Because that voice internalizing our pain is still going to come back sometimes when it's too much to handle in a world full of unknowns and wars and threats to myself and those I love. It's going to feel like I'm safer if I have something to control. But it's not. Our hunger is sacred and undeniable. When the world is too much, because it is, our bodies remind us that we will always be hungry, and that is a good thing. Hunger is amazing. It's anti-fascist. It's liberatory, no matter how tired we are and how complicated it gets to just put food in our mouths. Our bodies keep telling us that we need it. And every delicious bite is practice for taking action. From the table, into the streets, into the halls of power, our hunger will set us free. May it be so. Friends, we are so hungry. Our hunger is sacred and undeniable. From the crowded table to the streets and into the halls of power, our hunger sets us free. May it be so. May it be so.